Hey, and welcome to my tutorial for my brand new song, How I Feel. So, you guys have really liked the song, which I was blown away by, so thank you for that. So I thought I would ask the question on my Instagram, do you want a tutorial for this song? So I thought I would make one. It is on my MacBook, so as you'll see in the tutorial, there is quite a few times that it stops, but it's obviously that's the only way I can get onto my old Logic projects. But enough about that. If you haven't checked out the song already, this is what you're missing out on. So you can tell it's quite future bassy, it's quite punchy, it's quite poppy, a bit of everything. I wanted to do something different with this song. But just before I get into how I've done this song, I thought it would be important to show the revisits of this song. So I think this tutorial will be quite long, so obviously down here on the bottom you'll see like timestamps for the different sections, so if you're not bothered about the mix or whatever, you can skip forward, that's not crime. But I thought it'd be nice to kick it off to show how the actual idea of this song come about and how it sort of progressed through times. This whole idea come about originally as a collaboration between me and my good friend Jess. By the way, she does have a new remix out at the minute for Charli XCX, so go and check that out. Obviously, just like as we were hanging out or whatever, we would have regular studio days in Leicester because we were both interested in music and audio and that. So we decided to start a new collaboration, which didn't end up being anything. Unfortunately, we both just thought the track was lacking. There was no real potential in it. So we decided to just sort of quit it there and then and move on to something else. We made like quite a few projects in that day. This was just one of them. So this is the original idea. I'll just play through this.
Hang on to every word they've said. Feel like I'm always seeing red. Every day is filled with dread. My soul so pure, but so misled. That's so cool but so unkind. They say that I lost my shine, but they wish that had a line, cause I feel so undermined. Cause I feel so undermined.
So you can sort of get the general idea of this song. But yeah, as I say, this just never fulfilled to anything. As you can tell, like the chorus is missing out a lot of things. It's just drums and bass at the minute. So one thing that I do like to do, that when I have a project that I can see potential in, I always just bounce after the end of like that session. So after like we were done in Leicester, I decided to obviously like bounce out that, and obviously that's what you just saw. And again, when I was sort of transforming that into eventually How I Feel, which you're probably wondering how it got to that point. Basically, I bounce out as I'm going along, and then obviously you get to see the progression of the song. It's quite nice to see that sometimes. So originally then I did actually switch up, and then now you'll start to hear different elements from How I Feel. But obviously using that original vocal. So you got them da-da-dums, as you can tell. The bass line. Chord progression, obviously. One of the drum patterns, it does get filtered, as you will see. The lead you can hear coming in. You can hear it coming through now.
Cause I feel so undermined.
So you can tell already I'm not going to play anymore because you get the general idea of that. So yeah, made in September 2019. Obviously that's just how it come about. So then I added that vocal, but then I thought I'm not feeling the vocal on this track, so then I just created a lower key of it, but then also just from no vocal on. And again, it sounds a little bit different because the synths were a bit different, but here you can really start telling where it come from. Obviously I could go through all these files, but this video would be like an hour long. But yeah, I thought it would just be interesting just to show you how it can go from one project to another, and then both sound completely different. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, even if you aren't feeling a project, even if you don't like it or whatever at the time, it can still really be useful in the future. So one thing I've really gotten into the habit of is not deleting anything, even if I think it's absolutely garbage at the time. You can always go back and like salvage stems or something from it. So without further ado, let's get into the main mix of this song. Okay, as you see here, I have the mix file for How I Feel. As I've said before, this is made on my old MacBook. You can tell because I'm using Logic Pro and not Ableton. So there might be some problems as I'm playing it through. So if you see the CPU going crazy, I know about it. Don't worry, I've sorted it. So let's start from the top of this, just on the intro. So what I just wanted to do here is sort of really introduce the main chord progression of this track. So here we have a few different little layers going on. So the main one being this massive patch. You tell there, it's quite a weird sort of hollow chord, but it just really gets the listener like used to the chord progression that's about to take place. So for this, it was just a very simple 3 oscillator patch using a square wave, a polysaw, and another square wave. It is modulated a little bit by this noise. So all that does is, because the noise is randomly generated within Massive, it sort of gives it that wobble feel, a bit the same that isotope vinyl and that does to your sound, to make it a bit more lo-fi. I did sort of nick this idea off San Holo, so this isn't an original idea by any means, but it just works really well to give you that sort of lo-fi feel. So let's move on. What else have we got here? We've got little lower layers that sort of just accompany the main chord progression. Just sort of give it a bit more jazz to it, if you would. And along with that, we have the little arpeggiated bass line. So this is one of the main basses used in this. And to be honest, it is actually ripping off the main pad, which I forgot about. So again, it's just playing singular notes. So if I take the arpeggiator off, you're just playing a low down part of that original pad. But obviously the arpeggiator then flips it between the bottom and the top note. So just an octave apart, so you're like do 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 do. Sort of like walks the bass line a little bit. And I think that really, along with the drums, sort of just really introduced the tempo of the track, sort of gets you a feeling for the rhythm of it. That is accompanied by this very tightly EQ'd drum kit, which, along with just OTT and other elements, that eventually start pulling back to sort of give it a bit more presence. And then just before the intro takes place, there's a little gap, just to obviously get the user like ready for the next section, that just plays one of these main elements of the song that you will hear everywhere. That I've called da-da-dums down here. It's a preset I made a while ago, It's just a very weird bit of a niche lead. But I just really liked how it sounded in this entire song. So the first lead is panned more to the left and one's more to the right, just to give it a bit more spatiality in the mix. That's just accompanied by this double bass, just to give the first impact just a little bit more beef, if you would. So I actually haven't added any post-processing to this. This is just the preset of the lead, which I might release in the future, so keep your eyes upon that. But obviously, yeah, it's just a simple sort of like pluck using mainly saw and a sine wave. So it isn't a very attacky little, but again, it isn't really plucky, it isn't really attacky, but it just creates a really nice lead. Yeah, so to give it that sort of wobble feel, it is actually mostly done by the work here in vinyl. Or else for me, that just sounds a bit too mainstream, if you would, because vinyl also EQs like the high ends as well, to obviously give it that lo-fi feel, as well as like the little wobble that it gives to it. Because I just love that tail end of it with the reverb coming from Massive, how it just sort of slowly wobbles, you know what I mean, sort of giving it that detuned feel without it obviously being detuned. For me, that was like the driving factor of the song. I want that to be like one of the most common elements of the song, the sort of recognizable feature, if you would. So yeah, that's how I've created the sound to how I feel, if you know what I mean. So moving swiftly on, the actual main intro has a lot more punchy drums. It still has the ones from the intro. Again, just to add like a little bit of the layer and obviously adding a little bit of familiarity to the track. So the main drum part is actually coming from a just sampler instrument. It's not actually a sample, which is strange. It's actually one of the built-in Logic kicks called Eurodance Remix. I'll be honest, I haven't done anything to it. It is literally just playing a very simple kick and snare and clap pattern. So almost like dubstep drums, it'll play on the first beat of the bar, then it'll play also on the second beat of the bar, just to again sort of accompany the kick and the snare, just to give it that rhythm, the doom, tsh, boom, tsh. And not a lot was added there. A little bit of EQ just to bring out that kick a little bit more. A single EQ, which I believe I've automated. If I haven't, it's a waste of a single EQ. No, I have, yeah, right at the end, just to fade into the verse. Yeah, just to give that last snare sort of a filtered feeling. And then just a bit of compressor and OTT just to really bring out the transients of the drums. Then I think down here, one ARP that's used in the pre-chorus and the chorus, I believe, is this really sort of dreamy one. And that was made in Massive as well. Again, using the pad preset. So you know what I mean? So you can sort of hear the elements of the pad in there. But it just adds to that layer. Then I've used sampler on an acoustic guitar. That's how I mainly made the ARP. Don't worry, I mean, I'm looking surprised at this, but that is only just because I made this project like a year, 2 years ago, so honestly, it really surprises me when I go back and see how I did these things. Like right now, I wouldn't have thought of using a sampled acoustic guitar as a main ARP plug, but it works. So I'm not going to complain. Then there's a little bit of chorus tape delay and just a little bit of EQ to really bring out the shine of the strings at the top, along with the actual Dream lead from Serum. So that's using one of my presets that I made quite a while ago, which it sounds like one of the plucks from Light by San Holo. I was just on a sound design day and I liked it, so I end up using it quite a bit in like some of my projects. It's almost like my go-to pluck at this rate. But just by itself, it seems a bit empty, so obviously laid with a guitar just gives it that that extra layer to it. So moving on to the verse. This is what people have really wanted to know, is the actual vocal processing on this. And don't get me wrong, I am going to cringe at these vocals, because to make a good auto-tune feel, believe it or not, one of the best things you can do is actually to give a bad performance. I'll show you what I mean here. So, for those who aren't familiar with the song...
Don't play these games with my heart. Don't you know what you do to me? You should have stopped at the start. Look at this, now it's plain to see it.
So that's like the main hook of the verse. So like people quite like this because obviously I've tried something a little bit different, but without this layer on, the vocals sound really bad. Don't play these games with my heart. Don't you know what you do to me? You should have stopped at the start. And obviously that does not fit. Now it's plain to see yeah, so we don't talk about that. I sort of purposely did it bad. I didn't really try and like belt it out and try to do like a really good take of this. I decided I wanted to do it bad to sort of make the auto-tune work a little harder. So the main driving force of this is pitch correction. To sort of give it a more tightly knit auto-tune feel, you have to get rid of the notes that aren't in key. So say if I sang and it noticed that my voice was on an E, it would then move it up to F. And that's what this response does. So that's how quickly it notices I'm in a note that I shouldn't be singing in, and then it transfers it to a note which is in the scale. So that's when you get that sort of auto-tune feel, because it actually takes the dry out of tune vocal and then obviously puts it towards the in tune vocal. But if you do that really fast, it sounds very automated, as you can imagine, because obviously it's sampling the vocal like very quickly. So every sample it is sort of checking, okay, that one's out of key, let's move it up to F, let's move it up to F, and so it sort of creates no room for error. So obviously without this on, you get a very horrible take, but then with it on, you get the sort of T-Pain sound to your vocal. Don't play these games with my heart. But you can notice when it flickers to all these grayed out notes, it actually moves it to the closest note in the scale, again making it sound more in key, making it sound a little bit better. And don't get me wrong, that by itself doesn't sound bad. My heart. Don't you know what you do to me? But I thought if I released it like that, people would think that I am just a terrible vocalist and I really need auto-tune to sound good. So I thought I would actually prefer to sort of make it sound robotic, so it actually sounded purposeful, if you know what I mean. So I decided to add all these different like overdrives and bit crushers to give it that distorted feel. So we start with overdrive. Don't play these obviously, games with my heart. That gives it quite a bit of volume. Bit crusher, this does quite a bit to it. Don't play these games. You can mainly only notice it in the highs of that part. Obviously you can hear that it's very like crackly and almost robotic in the top end. Everything else still intact, but it's when it samples it higher up, because the bit rate is lower, it's sampled less at the top, so obviously the frequencies in the high end really get sort of mushed together, giving that robotic electronic feel. Don't play these games with... Now this is a personal favourite. This is a free plugin. I can't remember the company, I just know it's called IVGI2. Strange name, but I'm fine with that. But it is a really good sort of vintage saturator, and I just absolutely love it. I've used it like in college and uni projects to sort of give a very crunchy overdrive feel. Like it has very vintage a sound. It's very nice, as you can tell. Don't play these games with my heart. Don't you know what you do? So it really just crunches everything, and I tell you what, if you use this on guitars, it is just amazing. So yeah, I've just messed a little bit with mainly just the drive of this, just to really crunch everything in the vocal, sort of obviously oversaturate it, but that was the sort of whole point of it anyway. The only thing with me, it really crunched up the low end as well. It sort of brought up like the room noise from when I recorded this take, so I had to do a bit of EQing just to make it sound a little bit more natural.
Don't play these games with my heart.
Just to take out all of these mids from about 200 to 800 that were just really muddying up the mix, so I really just had to take them out. A bit of OTT, add all the transients back into the voice.
Don't play these games with my heart.
A bit of vinyl just to add, again, a bit more lo-fi feel to it, and then a compressor in the end.
Don't play these games with my heart. Don't you know what you do to me?
But yeah, I was really happy with the vocal. I wanted to just do something different with these vocals, give it that oversaturated, over-distorted, over-auto-tuned feel to it. And I don't know, I feel like it works quite well. So that just involves, other than the vocals, it just involves elements from before. So that's literally just the chords that we've already heard from the intro, along with a little lead, I believe. Yeah, the main lead, which actually was a Serum built-in preset, but I really liked it for this song, was the Aldi Clang. But I didn't do anything to this because I just like the sound of it. It's very metallic, it's very punchy, it just really works in the mix. So then obviously that carries on until the pre-chorus. Then this kick and... So that just basically obviously builds up all the tension towards it. Just the kicks get a lot faster, the claps get a lot faster. And again, with the sort of lo-fi minimalistic feel, I wanted to carry that on here. So obviously it still builds tension, but I didn't want it to be over the top and like in your face. So then there is a little bit more going on here. So more of the intro elements come back in. Just with a couple more things going on here. So, as you remember me saying before, this was actually an idea for an all collab between me and Jess. And this actual lead was the original lead for that song. I just decided to keep it in there as like a little Easter egg, if you would. Obviously, you can't hear that going on with everything else going on in the pre-chorus. So yeah, next time you listen to it, see if you can hear that in the pre-chorus. So then, obviously the ARPs come back in from the intro. But now this lead is obviously bringing out more filtering. I always like trying to introduce the next section before it happens. It just sort of gets the listener a little bit more familiar with the next section before the next section obviously happens. So then obviously when we go into the chorus section, I have actually disabled the synths here. When I open the next mix section, you'll be able to see it a little bit more. I can show you some of the little elements because I've layered a lot of instances of Massive and Serum here. The actual chord progression is portraying everything that's been in the intro and that. It just give it a bit more rhythm, so instead of just going da-na-na, and now it's going da-na-na-na-na-na-na-na. Obviously to give it a bit more of a rhythm, because obviously if I held down the chords it would just be boring. Obviously you just want to give it a bit of jazz, a bit of spice to the chorus, which is everything that you should try to do with a song. The chorus wants to be the spiciest bit, you know what I mean? So this was just the lead that you've heard previously, laid with just a higher version of that. That was just a very simple initialized square tooth wave, nothing special going on, just quite a few voices. So I've also used another C, I think it was the same patch. Just a lower octave down and just in the mid-range, just to give it that sort of pad vibe. A little Sign pluck one. What else have we got? A very high, massive one. Then we've got a lower down one here as well. That is what you mainly hear with the tail of the chords. The rest of these up here have mostly been quite staccato and quite obviously punchy, whereas that is more sustained and obviously will give you more of a tail. So when them da-da-dums come on, it just sort of has the reverb tail off of the chords, just to sort of keep them involved in the chorus, even when they're not playing. And I think this one also has a little reverb tail. Then the rest are pretty much self-explanatory. They're mainly just like filling in any empty space that I thought there was. The basses aren't that special. And I think that is just a simple 808 patch that I either found online or made. I can't remember at this point. Along with the layers that I've used before as well. Just to make the bass line sound a little bit more interesting. Oh yeah, the drums. So the kick, like the chorus, is mainly off a sampler instrument. It was actually laid with a future bass snare as well from Cymatics. Again, that's just another later snare. I believe these are hi-hats. Yeah, so we got a ride in the right here. Then I think it's an open hat in the other one. I do like involving different hats. Again, it just adds that bit of variety. And one thing I absolutely love doing to the hi-hat. Number one, if you want just a very simple rhythm like a one of the good things you can do is actually add an arpeggiator onto it, just playing the one note. So then all you have to do is hold down the note, and then obviously it'll do it in a 1/16 pattern. Then you've probably noticed as well, I've added a little stereo tremolo to this. So all that does, it's like an auto pan, so every quarter note it will go from the left ear to the right ear. And with the depth of 100, it does literally go straight to the left, straight to the right, straight to the left, straight to the right. And I love doing that with the hi-hats. Rather than putting like a stereo expander or something on it to make it stereo, I actually like sort of panning the hi-hats like that. And then the only last part of the drums is just the tom fills. I tell you what, you'll see the drums in the next mix session. So moving on, one other thing that I like to do is create just a few bars after the chorus before it goes into the next verse, for a couple of reasons. Number one, I don't want to suddenly go from the chorus to the verse, because then it makes it very playable for DJs as well. I know when I'm mixing songs like this, them few 8 to 16 bars can be great, where everything's just stripped back. It might just have a vocal in, or just a few elements from the original song. Like, that'd be a great point after the chorus is played for the DJ to suddenly bring in another track for another 8 bars, 16 bars, you know what I mean, and create a nice mix before switching over to the next song. So as you hear now, so the vocals come back, just playing that one little riff, obviously like the main one of the song, don't want to feeling you. So the only thing left here is the bass lines, the basses, and again, all that does is, it just sort of strips back from the main chorus, and obviously creates that little playable 8 to 16 bars. So the only last thing to show you is the second chorus, and the only difference to this from the first chorus is the drum pattern. So obviously everything is sidechained towards the kick, so the synths pump a lot more when the kick drum is more frequent than just a slower kick and snare pattern. And then obviously these toms are going a bit crazier down the bottom to obviously accompany the different kick patterns. And that is it from this session. Let me just open a mix section just to see if anything else is different. Right, so one thing that I always seem to do, especially with Logic, and to be honest sometimes it's just nice to do anyway, is actually bounce your track into stems and separately mix them. Number one for me, this was because the CPU, as you've seen, keeps on overloading. But also, sometimes it's just nice to have it in a different environment. And obviously, sort of start fresh with it. Sometimes it's easier to see what's wrong with the track, what really needs mixing. So one thing, especially with the drums, I found is that the volume was a bit too jaded going through the sections. Like, I felt like the intro was a bit too loud, the chorus was a bit too low. So obviously with the chorus I've added a little bit more OTT, a little bit more compression, and added actually a bit more stereo feel. That was mainly just volume changes, which again would be a bit harder to do in the previous session, if you see what I mean, because obviously then I would have to automate the gain of the buzz, and yeah, it'd be a bit more complicated than doing it in a separate section. The chorus, I've actually added a gate towards that. So I think the problem was here that the reverb tail of the synths, because of like OTT and other elements, including reverb, was a bit too much. So I just added a light gate to that just to sort of make it a little bit more snappy. Basses, I think, so all I've done here, this actually does nothing. The width and that is still at 100, and the mid still at 100. But it is just checking that it is in mono and nothing is getting spread in the bass, because obviously there's no point in the actual low end of the bass being spread out. The vocals, I've just added a tiny bit more processing to this. So we just a slight de-esser, because I felt like the S's and that in the voice were a bit too sharp when they come out. A bit more compression, a bit more overdrive. RC20, which is amazing if you can get your hands on it. Again, just adds a tiny bit more flutter, again for like the lo-fi feel. A bit of air to the voice as well, so like the high end, because obviously I've compressed it and saturated that much. It was missing some of the natural air that you'd get in vocals. Then a tiny bit of space as well. And all that does is adds like a tiny bit of reverb, like in the extreme lefts and rights. Again, it's making the vocal a little bit wider, but also not taking away that mid from it, which is really important. Yeah, so here is where I mainly made the bridge using different elements. So instead of going straight into the second verse, you have this sort of bass line going on, the lead slowly filtering away, and these parts, if I reverse it, so when it goes into the bridge, my first word is tell. So that tell, all I've done is I separated that tell. I basically like cut it out, put it into another track, and added like a absolute shit ton of reverb onto it. And then if you bounce that out, so it goes like tell, but then all you do is you add it back in and you reverse it. So then obviously that reverb tail slowly starts coming back in until it gets to the dry part where I'm actually saying tell. So I just felt like that vocal just sort of introduced the next section really nicely. Sort of abstractly, obviously, but I just really liked it. So everything fades away, so you know, oh shit, we're going to go into something completely different here, which is obviously what a bridge is supposed to do. Then I can't remember where I added this piano from, but it's there. But yeah, that's basically it from this mix session. And again, I just wanted to add a separate mix session just to again, you've seen like different elements of how it's just better to work with the stems and completely start from afresh. Like, especially with like the drum, it would just be so annoying to keep on automating the different drum parts, as you can imagine. And I know this is going to be a shameless self-promote now, but before we go into the master, this is the actual master for the album. If you don't know already, I have an album coming out on the 23rd of April. And it is called Uninspired Minds. It contains 11 songs ranging from house to future bass to dubstep, and I think you will really enjoy it when it comes out. Obviously, How I Feel was part of that. I didn't just randomly promote it for no reason. Obviously, the main master for this is in the album master, because the album actually flows into one another, so it would be very jarring to sort of master each song separately and then try and piece them together. It was easier to put them all in this one master session to make sure everything together sounded good. So that's mainly like the reason why I'm opening it in this project, and why you'll see the project is like loads of tracks long. Don't worry about it. I'm just going to show you the How I Feel one. So I've explained before, this is the actual mastering session for the whole of the album. So here we have the actual How I Feel final version version 19, so yeah, this took quite a long time to master. So one thing I always love doing is putting just 3 songs that I am listening to at the time, or that I just really like the mixed or masters to. And them at the time were Virtual Riot Iteration, his interlude to his Save Yourself EP, Oliver Tree 1993 featuring Little Ricky, that was part of his Ugly is Beautiful album. And Barely Alive single Spicy Future. So all I like doing is soloing my song compared to their song, and mainly just checking that the volume's okay in my eyes, because obviously you don't want someone going from one of these songs skipping to your song and it being way quieter, or else they will just turn it off and not be bothered by it. So I believe I got it close enough, in my opinion. So then if I actually take you into how I feel master, I'll just turn this down, or else it will blow my ears off. And in the end, I was really happy with that master. So all I've got on it is a tiny little bit of OTT, just to add a tiny bit more saturation, a bit more compression before the end. I use Logic's very secret, hidden but awesome weapon called Match EQ. If you don't know what this is, you can drag in the raw bounce of your song. In this instance, how I feel, it will learn the average EQ of your song. So like if the bass is way too much, if the highs are way too much, and then what you can do is drag in a reference song. Normally WAVs are a lot better, else the highs get cut off extremely. And then what Logic will try to do is it will actually try and compare your average EQ to their average EQ and merge them together to make your EQ more like their EQ, if that makes sense. So here, it believed my song was really lacking in the mids compared to this song, which I believe was a Virtual Riot track. I can't remember now. But obviously, they thought the Virtual Riot's track had a lot more mids, whereas mine were lacking there, so decided to bring it up. And if I turn this on and off as I'm playing, see the mids are just totally scooped out on, but then when the Match EQ's on, it'll bring up them mids, which again sometimes is really hard to decipher just using your own ears or just experimenting. So don't wrong, I don't like fully relying on the Match EQ, but it normally gets the job done. Then a little bit of gain staging just to bring up the level before limiting. And then in Ozone 8, so here I only have a limiter and an imager as well. And all that this does is this just really, so all my imager does is I'm just really fine tuning the stereo. I mean, it doesn't create a massive difference, it's just something that I like to add on. So obviously the isotope one's good because it's multi-band, so I can go between these bands and spread them out or tighten them up as much as I want to. So obviously here I've only just spread the highs out a little bit, and if I go over to the maximizer, you see it is limiting quite hard, but it doesn't sound too harsh, if you know what I mean. If I pushed it further, it would probably start distorting and sound a lot worse, but if anything, this just regulates out the track, makes sure that it can be as loud as possible, and then again, obviously it makes it nearer towards my references than it originally was. But that's all that I use Ozone for. Don't get me wrong, the dynamics, the exciter and that they're really good, they're really powerful tools, but I only just like using maybe a couple of them, because as I say, the mix should be the thing that you're solely working on to sound good. You shouldn't have a bad mix and then expect the master to do all the work for you, because it won't. So that's what I've learnt over the years, at least, anyway. So that's why I have quite a minimalistic mastering approach. Then obviously being within the album as well, I wanted this track, I also started referencing this to the other tracks as well, because you don't want to go from one track in the album and it sound really bad compared to another track in the album. So I had to try and regulate everything and sort of get everything sounding good and sounding as one. which obviously took a long time to do, but in the end I was quite happy how this come about. So yeah, that's about it for this tutorial. If you haven't already, How I Feel is out everywhere now. It'll be a part of my new album, Uninspired Minds, which will be out on the 23rd of April. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you want to see more tutorials in the future, or if you want to see another tutorial like this for another one of my songs, just let me know on Instagram or on the comments here, and I'll be sure to check it out. And so yeah, I hope you enjoyed, and I hope to catch you again later.